What's up everyone, welcome back to Handheld Hero. So after about 5 hours with Hades 2, I'm already at the point where I can say this pretty comfortably: this game is awesome, and not in that vague, yeah, it seems promising kind of way. I mean, it already feels polished, it already feels addictive, and it already feels like the kind of game that can completely eat your night if you're not careful. That's what hit me the fastest. This does not feel like Supergiant Games came back, played it safe, and tried to rerun the first game with a different coat of paint. It feels like they knew exactly what needed to carry over, exactly what needed to change, and they made those changes with a lot more confidence than I expected this early on. So no, this is not my final review, but after 5 hours, I already think there's more than enough here to explain why this thing is working so well and why I'd already call it a must-try. At the core, the loop is still exactly what you want from Hades. Fight, die, upgrade, go again, tell yourself one more run, then somehow you're still there way later than you planned. That part still absolutely works. But what stood out to me almost immediately is that Hades 2 does not feel like it's trying to just recreate the exact same rhythm from the first game. This one feels darker, more deliberate, more magical, and the second that starts clicking, the whole game starts feeling like its own thing. It's still fast, it's still chaotic, but it feels like there's a little more control in the middle of that chaos now. You're not just diving straight into everything and figuring it out as you go. You're shaping fights a little more, you're thinking about where enemies are, what space you own, and how you want to pace your damage. And that difference gives the whole game its own identity really fast. The combat is probably the biggest reason I got pulled in this fast, because if the combat felt off, none of the rest would matter. But thankfully, it feels really good, and more importantly, it feels distinct. The magic system does a lot for that. Once you realize your Omega moves are not just flashy bonus attacks, but a real part of how you create pressure and burst damage, the combat starts opening up in a much bigger way. It also helps that Melinoë just plays differently. That single dash flowing into a sprint changes the whole feel of movement. At first, I wasn't fully sure how I was going to feel about that compared to Zagreus, but pretty quickly it started making sense, especially once the fights got busier and enemies started throwing longer attacks that force you to stay moving instead of just panic dashing twice and resetting. And then there's the cast. That might be one of my favorite changes early on, because it's not just there for extra damage, it actually feels useful. Locking enemies down with that circle gives you breathing room, sets up damage, and makes the combat feel a lot more tactical without slowing it down too much. So yeah, the combat still feels fast and slick, but it also feels a little sharper, a little smarter, and a lot more intentional. Another big reason this is landing so well for me is that the game already feels polished, but it also feels like it still has a lot more to show. That's a really good combo, because even after several hours, while you're still spending a lot of time in those earlier areas, it never really feels like you're spinning your wheels. You still feel progress. That matters a lot in a game like this, because if the early hours start feeling repetitive before the bigger systems really kick in, you feel that immediately. Here, I really didn't get that feeling. A lot of that comes from what's happening around the runs. You've got Arcana cards instead of the old mirror setup, and that already makes progression feel more flexible and a little more personal. You've got gathering tools, you've got reagents, you've got incantations opening systems and pushing the game outward from the crossroads. So even when a run ends badly, it still feels like something happened. Something moved, something opened up, and that's a huge part of why the game keeps pulling you back in. And honestly, one of the most underrated things this game is doing well already is the enemy variety, because that's a huge reason the early hours don't start feeling stale. Even when you're still looping those first maps, the game keeps throwing enough different enemy behaviors at you that you can't really go on autopilot for very long. That matters way more than people think, because replayability is not just about getting a new boon or finding a stronger build. Replayability is also about whether the game keeps forcing you to adjust. And Hades 2 definitely does that. The pressure changes, the spacing changes, the pace of encounters changes, and the game keeps nudging you into using your tools better instead of just repeating one safe habit over and over again. That's a huge reason it already has that dangerous one more run energy. because the game keeps giving you just enough novelty and resistance to stop things from flattening out. So after 5 hours, my take is pretty simple. Hades 2 is already a must-try. Not because I think I've seen everything, I obviously haven't, and not because I think it's flawless already. That's not really the point. The point is that even this early, the game already feels polished, confident, and incredibly easy to recommend. The combat feels great, the progression feels good, the enemy variety is strong, and maybe most importantly, it already has that feeling the best roguelikes have, where you sit down to play a little, and the game just quietly takes over your whole evening. That's probably the best compliment I can give it. So no, this is not my final word on Hades 2, but after 5 hours, I can already tell this is something special. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one.